Welcome back to the What's Next podcast, coming to you right here from beautiful Monterey, right here on the beach. Beautiful day today. I have the most interesting clients come in, and today is no exception. Today we have Miss Keely Clifford, and she has a background in environmental, and we're going to cover a lot of stuff today. She is married to a retired Army, very high ranking. So she's traveled all over the world. I can't wait to hear some stories about that. How you doing, Miss Keely?
Oh, I'm doing well, Steve.
Doing well?
Yeah, nice
Awesome.
to be here. This is a great room.
Isn't this great?
It. Yeah, it's a really nice spot.
I was just telling you earlier that I see a lot of people, and I love it when you come in because we just talk and talk and talk. It's probably not the greatest massage, but we just always talk. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland.
Oh, over on the east side.
Yeah, on the East Coast. And then we moved to Ashland, Oregon when I was 12, when my mom remarried. And then she got divorced again.
That's some move.
So then we moved back to Annapolis, Maryland when I was 14. So I spent a lot of years on the East Coast.
Did you most of the time there? So you
Yep.
went to school?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you go to college there? Or,
I went to college in Boston and Vermont.
Oh, right. Sure.
And then
all
I
over
got
there.
my master's at the University of Maryland.
Okay, tell me what you studied. I know you did some environmental studies. And
Yeah. So
what's your background on that?
I got a master's in public policy with an environmental concentration.
Okay, do tell.
Specifically environmental policy concentration. Yeah, so it was a mid-year, or what's called mid-career program that both the state of Maryland, where I started working, and then the EPA, where I later transferred to, they had this program because they wanted their mid-level people to go get a master's degree.
Oh, right on.
So I signed my name on the dotted line.
Nice.
And 4.5 years later, I got it.
Yeah. Oh, it must have been something that you were interested in, obviously.
Oh, yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it, but I was also working full-time, had a long commute, and I was an Army Reserve officer, so I generally could only take one class at a time.
Okay.
3 semesters worth.
Sure.
Occasionally I took 2 classes.
Stretch it out a little bit. Over a few years.
Well, it was 4.5 years. So
Was it? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the
right.
5 years was the maximum.
And then you got your master's.
Yeah, got my master's.
Master's in
Environmental policy.
policies. So you could actually work in government almost.
Well, yeah. I was working in government when I started
Okay.
that program.
Right. Did you ever end up going into the active Army or military?
No, I became a Army Reserve officer in 1987.
Okay.
Went to officer candidate school at Fort Benning School for Boys.
Okay.
That was the song, Benning School for Boys. There weren't many of us women there.
Right, right. Where was that? San Antonio? Was that?
That's in.
that's Air Force.
So Fort Benning, Georgia.
Oh, Georgia. Okay. Right, right. Georgia. Oof.
So I went there from March to June because at the time I was working for the state of Maryland doing environmental enforcement work on construction sites.
Ooh.
And so I tried to go from like December to April because it's pretty slow in construction.
I see.
But the Army works pretty slowly and things.
Yeah.
So by the time everything got done, it was March. But things, it was still plenty chilly down there.
Sure. Yeah.
Officer
Right.
candidate school is pretty rough.
Right. So you were working with construction sites up there, or logging communities, or?
So in Maryland, when I worked for the Department of Natural Resources, I worked on all kinds of construction sites.
Oh, I see.
Small ones like housing developments or shopping centers, and then great big ones like big highway projects and interchanges, those cloverleaf things.
Sure.
I mean, it's amazing how they design those and how the contractors have to build up dirt over here and over there. And the first time I remember doing a big highway job, I was so confused. Like, how is this road going to work? And why did you put the dirt over there? And wow. And then you study the plans long enough, and then
Oh,
like,
that's how it works, right?
Because they have to
They
go
have to
up.
launch up to go over.
Over, and
Sure.
then all these clover leaves and
Sure.
horseshoes, and so
Yeah,
wow.
right.
But for my first one, it was like, wow.
So they're taking up a lot of land
Yes.
in those areas. So you're just in there to make sure that they're not.
Oh, so in Maryland, it rains a lot.
Okay.
And the Chesapeake Bay is where all the rivers take the water to
Oh,
the
I see.
Chesapeake
Sure.
Bay.
Okay.
So as part of the Chesapeake Bay restoration work, my program was created to manage and try to make construction sites less bad for the environment.
Okay.
And they do that by keeping sediment and oil spills out of the streams and creeks and storm drains. And if you've ever been to a construction site, you know, the first thing they do is take all the trees down and everything that's green and growing. They just plow it away with their big bulldozers and, you know, all the other equipment. So an engineer designs a plan that the contractor is supposed to install on the construction site. So they build basins here and berms over there to channel the flow. So it's quite a bit of work for the contractor to do, but it's not that much.
No, it saves quite a bit.
It saves a lot. I mean,
Right.
gosh, if you don't have any sediment and erosion control on a construction site, the local stream will just be demolished. The fish all die, and then that goes straight into the Chesapeake Bay. And there's 12,000 miles of shoreline on the Chesapeake Bay. Everybody loves to boat. And all that sediment just fills in the creeks.
Oh,
So then your boat runs aground more.
right.
So there's a big incentive when I started in '84 to clean up the construction site so that they wouldn't pollute as much.
Yeah, because they're just running right in, huh?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
awful. Yeah.
You know, I spent a lot of years building houses when I was young.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. You go into some plots, and you're right, they just bulldoze as far as you can see, and they just start pouring foundations. And other ones go in there, and they strategically leave trees, and they're still digging foundations and everything, but they're leaving the trees, which makes a nicer neighborhood when they're done building the houses, I think.
Exactly. And
It's
those houses where they save the trees, they are more expensive to sell. Well,
Sure.
what I mean to say is you get a higher price when someone wants to buy it because trees are desirable.
That makes sense,
Yeah.
you know. They just have little twigs and future
Yeah,
trees
you know, and
along there. And
half the trees might die, and then you
Right,
got to start
usually
over again.
do.
And yeah,
yeah, they do. Right.
yeah. So, and the East Coast, Maryland gets plenty hot. So, anytime there are trees, it just really keeps the temperature better.
Oh, right.
And then we get huge, heavy rains back there, real gully washers. So the trees help protect the land by the rainwater hitting the tree, and it slows it down and it makes it sort of dribble instead of just buckets of water coming down.
Right to the earth.
Right.
Right. Wow. That's cool.
Yep. So I inspected construction sites like shopping centers, housing developments, highways, and lumber operations, just about any place where there was earth moving equipment.
Yeah. You told me stories about being chased out of some logging places. You get a little scared, huh?
Yeah.
You're a little girl out there.
Oh yeah. 'Cause
So what you said they gave you a Bronco or something. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the state of Maryland gave all of us brand spanking new inspectors. We were all in our sort of early mid-20s, so
Sure.
full of, vim and
Vinegar,
vigor
right.
and incentive. And we were, you know how when a young person gets really motivated.
Sure.
So I was that
You
young
can change the
person.
world.
Absolutely. And that first year, I got the Sue the Bastard Award, which was given to only one person in the whole
That's
Department of
funny.
Natural Resources.
Give me the meaning behind that. You were
The Sue the Bastard Award was just the most successful enforcement person, I guess you could say.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah,
You're
when you
going
work
after 'em.
10 or 11 hours a day and most of your colleagues only work, 8.
Sure.
You can get a lot more done.
You're putting in overtime.
Yeah, I mean, I was just so highly motivated. And
Getting after those bastards.
yeah. Well, no, I always tried to instruct the contractor on how properly to install the controls that he agreed to install. And that's why they got their permit.
Right.
The contractor agrees to build his buildings to standard, and the contractor agrees to do environmental controls to standard. Contractors know all about standards,
Sure.
but everybody needs someone to follow up behind them to make sure they do it.
They're towing the line.
Right.
That's right.
So the first time I would go on a site, I would instruct and, very nicely explain how to do things. And then, I'm going to be back in 3 days and it better be done. And, half the time they wouldn't get it done. And the other half the time they did. And the word got out and then everybody started doing it right.
Like yellow tag it or something like a building inspector would or something? Or
yeah, if it's bad, I can shut down the construction
red tag,
site.
yeah, that's a scary one.
And that was the most powerful tool that we had.
That might you get chased off a couple of job sites, huh?
Yeah. It took quite a few, because my first territory was in southern Maryland that was like the Wild West. They had just started to implement building codes in the early 80s.
So you had guys that have been doing this for 30 years going, what are you talking about, right?
And that was one of my first criminal cases that went to court.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was
what
pretty
happened?
Scary. Well, he didn't do the controls that he was supposed to do, and his failure resulted in an entire stream silting in and just destroying an entire habitat.
Sure. Right.
And
you have to go after him for that.
Well, we had to. He wouldn't fix it.
He was just being a jerk.
Yeah. Well, he was the old school guy,
Oh, right.
And we never had to do this before.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, and then on the lumber, on the forest harvest logging site, these operations are quite a ways back in the woods. So I would drive my Ford Bronco
the
down
70s
the road.
Ford Bronco.
Yeah.
Love those.
Yeah, exactly. Down, over hill and over dale, and then get to the logging job. And my job there was to ensure that they did not run their equipment through the stream. They're supposed to build like a bridge with a pipe and gravel so that they can safely cross over the stream.
Right.
But that takes time and money. So they often don't like to do that, especially if no one's going to check.
Right.
So
way out there in the woods.
Yeah, they're way out in the woods. But anyway, so I got chased out of one of those sites because I got there and there was no stream crossing. The equipment was just running through the stream. And this stream went to a Class 3 trout stream that people were still fishing.
Right.
It was one of the last few streams that still was in good enough shape to have a native population of trout.
Oh.
So a lot of streams in Maryland, they would stock the fish every year because the stream was no longer healthy enough to sustain its own population.
Right.
And so it was just unconscionable in this stream.
Wow.
So he's racing his logging equipment through the stream, and he'd cut down some of the big trees right by the stream. He had made a complete catastrophe of the site.
No kidding.
So I went right up to him and talked to him, and this guy had about 3 teeth in his head. It was like one here, and one here.
We call those summer teeth. Some are there, some are missing.
Yeah, and I was nice and professional, but that did not go well, and so luckily I was able to run to the truck and speed out of there and
chased out of there.
went and got myself a natural resources police officer.
There you go.
It took about 2 hours to get him. Waited for him patiently, took him back on the site, and there he is with his gun.
Bozo was still there with his gun. Hello.
The natural resource police officers
I see.
carry
right,
guns.
They had a gun.
Well, the loggers may have had guns
I know,
too.
right?
But Maryland was never one of those gun-carrying places.
No.
It might be now, but it wasn't back then.
Right.
Growing up, I never saw anybody with a gun.
Yeah.
Luckily.
They're far enough in the woods, you want to have something in case there's bears or something.
And of course, all the loggers are from West Virginia.
Oh, are they?
So they may have had their rifles in the car.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I didn't stand around. I
wasn't going to wait to see.
I just let the natural resources police officer handle everything.
Right. So you did that for how many years? You did that
8 years.
Oh, 8. I was thinking 4.
So I was an inspector for about 4 years, and then I was an area supervisor for 4 years, which meant that I got more complicated sites and then supervised 3 inspectors.
Oh, okay. You're the boss.
No, I
moved up a little bit.
I just up a little bit.
A little bit.
There were still,
Oh, sure, right.
You know how
the
it goes.
Boss.
I was a little higher cog in the wheel.
Right. It's kind of nice to have people under you. And
Yeah.
You know, you cover more ground for sure. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Right. So what'd you do? 8 years, and then what'd you decide to do after that?
So I met someone who worked for the EPA in
Okay.
Washington, D.C., the Environmental Protection Agency.
Oh, all right.
And she was saying how the EPA is really looking for state employees because the EPA sets minimum national guidelines that each state is supposed to comply with. And the states can have a more strict standard in many cases, like California. We all know, or at least I know, that California always leads the country in most of environmental protection.
Sure.
And Maryland does in water resources. They're a little bit behind in land use and a lot of other things, but it's hard to be one of those colonies that have all these. Everybody owns land there in the state of Maryland. All the waterfront land is owned by people.
Right.
Like the house, they own the land all the way to the river, all the way to the bay.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like here in California, the state owns most of this waterfront.
Oh, really?
So that everybody has access to it.
Right.
So anyway, then I went to EPA headquarters, and I didn't have any experience in hazardous waste, but they put me in hazardous waste, helping states get authorized to run their own hazardous waste program. So that was a completely new skill set that I didn't know anything about, but I know how state government works, and so I did that. I did several jobs there at EPA headquarters, and then in
So you weren't necessarily chasing bad guys at that point.
No,
you were just
I was-
kind of teaching people from other states how to get their own thing going.
yeah, I was a desk jockey,
Oh, right on.
and I was commuting from Annapolis, Maryland to Northern Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't too good.
No, right.
But-
get some stuff done, but
Yeah.
not worth it.
But the best commute I ever had was I would drive to one of the metro stations and then ride my bike in
Oh,
to
perfect.
Crystal City.
Yeah.
That was good.
Right.
Riding through the Capitol and all the beautiful landmarks and
Sure.
over the beautiful bridges and then on the George Washington
Right.
hiker-biker trails. So, and it was about the same amount of time.
Sure. Right. It's good exercise. You blow off
Oh.
your stress.
Oh, absolutely, because
You know.
sometimes your day would be so miserable.
Exactly,
And
right.
if you could ride your bike home,
Sure.
then everything was good.
Right. Even if it's like a half an hour commute, drive, whatever, just a little time by yourself.
Yeah.
Even better on a bike with
Yeah.
beautiful
Well,
landscaping.
it would take an hour and a half each way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Traffic in D.C. is horrific.
Sure. Right.
But I rode my bike to work through both my pregnancies.
Wow.
I had a mountain bike, and they had handlebars that had little bars at the end,
Oh, okay.
like horns.
Yeah.
And they originally start low like this.
Uh-huh.
And then as I got bigger and bigger, I just had to lift them higher and higher.
Just reach over your belly.
Yeah, over the belly is like, woo.
That's funny.
But it was a really good. And then I guess in 2000, after my second child, I didn't want to go back to D.C., and I landed an EPA job in my hometown of Annapolis, Maryland, with the Chesapeake Bay Program Office of EPA. And they were looking for a water resources expert, and my 8 years at the state of Maryland is what attracted them to me.
Wow.
And there were a lot of EPA people that lived in Annapolis that commuted to D.C., so I felt very fortunate that I got picked for the job.
Yeah, Annapolis, that's where the big military college is.
Yeah, the Naval Academy is
Academy.
there.
Yeah.
Yep. And also one of the most unique universities called St. John's College.
Oh, okay.
There's one in Annapolis and one in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And their curriculum is the great books. So they read, Descartes about math.
Right.
So they don't get taught normal math. They do it the way Descartes did it.
Right.
And Aristotle. So we have the Naval Academy, which is, straight and narrow, and then St. John's. And so they would have this competition each year for it's not cricket. What is that where you, the balls with the mallets that go through the...
Croquet?
Croquet,
Yeah,
that's it.
right.
Yeah, big competition.
Really?
Makes the front of the newspaper.
That's so European, isn't it?
Yeah, but the middies, the Naval Academy midshipmen, were very serious about it. And
Really?
the St. Johnnies were too, so it was kind of fun.
My grandpa Blazin, he had a place in Michigan and he had a place in Florida, and he was so big on that.
Oh,
We
yeah.
always had the croquet set up, and we'd play for hours. Yeah, I wonder if that's World War II time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it might be.
It might be, huh? Because I haven't really seen a croquet set since.
No, and when you see croquet,
But it was huge
it's
back then.
normally older people.
Sure.
So this was unusual to have young people.
Right, you put the ball against the other one and whack, you hit the other one, knock it out of the.
Dog
it was
eat-
a great game.
Dog eat dog.
Yeah, it was too. That's neat. So from there, 2 children. You had 2 children?
Yes.
Yeah.
Two
Boys,
daughters.
girl, two
daughters.
girls.
They're now 23 and 25.
Oh, youngsters.
Oh, well,
Wow.
that means that I'm in my 60s. That's what that means. It's like, whoa, that's pretty serious.
Yeah. Well, you must have had them a little bit later.
I did. In my late 30s, I had them.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of scary, huh? After all that.
Yeah, and we felt very lucky that I was able to do everything just fine. A lot of older women are not able to conceive and stuff, and so ours was just really easy.
Or it's risky.
Right.
So
yes. Well, I was considered a high-risk pregnancy.
Sure. Right.
Probably especially because of all the chocolate I ate.
Well,
and I never ate that much chocolate.
I don't believe that.
Boy, during my pregnancy, I couldn't get enough.
Yeah, I remember one child, my wife was all about sweet and sour chicken. Had to have that. The next one was all about pizza. And it's just like something just grabs a hold of them.
Yeah.
And she can't get enough.
Yeah, and the uniform theme in that is unhealthy food.
Right. I
Because
think it
I
is.
normally eat pretty healthfully.
Do you really?
But I just didn't feel like healthy food during
chocolate.
chocolate and then burgers, and I never was a big burger person.
Really? Yeah, must have needed something.
Your
body needed something.
I just opened the floodgates.
Right.
Like
once you okay
if
the
I'm
chocolate,
going to eat
it's
junk
like,
food, I
okay.
might as well just live at McDonald's or whatever.
Right. So how old were you when you met Bruce?
Let's see. Well, he and I married when I was 35.
Okay.
I met him a couple years before that, like 32, 33. And he and I were both Army Reserve officers.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yep, because Bruce was active duty for 10 years, then a reserve officer for 12 years, where he and I met.
Mm-hmm.
And he made full bird colonel, as they say.
Wow.
Yeah.
Doesn't get much higher than that, does it?
Oh, no. There's 4 generals higher than the
Oh,
colonel.
that's generals. Oh,
Yeah.
then there's the star generals.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
1
right,
star,
right.
2 star, 3 star, 4.
Right, okay.
But a colonel with the big eagles, is really, really respected. And
That's about as high as you're going to find out there
that's
in the field.
Making colonel is a huge accomplishment.
Wow.
And very few people make general, obviously.
Right. Sure. Right.
Yep. So and
I'm
then
surprised you can do that as a reservist. You can do that. You can still work.
Oh, yeah.
Through the reserves.
Absolutely.
Oh wow.
He was a really good officer. He kept everything from active duty, and he did it the same way in the reserves.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
And every company he would go to, he would raise the standard exponentially because he was so good at empowering people so that they wanted to do their job well.
Wow. Yeah.
If each individual soldier wants to do their job well,
Yeah.
it's fabulous.
Wow.
But if you try to micromanage them or look over their shoulder too much, then they're like, I don't want to try my best.
Too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. That's a skill. Woo.
Yeah, and he was really good at that.
Yeah. That's a great boss to have. Right. Mm-hmm. So many jerk bosses in my life. It's cool if they were like a little more on my side, huh?
Oh, I know. Yeah, I've had my fair share too.
Right. You were telling stories one day about your time in Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. I want to hear more about that because I really don't know anything about Ethiopia.
Yeah. So.
No, before that you went to France. Or was that after? I get confused. Can you tell me?
So in 2001, the Army invited Bruce back on active duty as a full colonel to go be the U.S. Defense Attaché to Hungary.
Oh, wow.
So the capital of Hungary is Budapest.
Okay.
And at first I said absolutely not, because Bruce had been working in his civilian job in Ukraine, and I'd visited him several times there, and it was all pretty depressing.
Or was it even then? Right.
It's rough. You know, the
Is
former
it
Soviet republics are hard.
hard people or
It's hard. It's a hard life. No,
just
the people are nice.
what do you mean? It's just not the amenities, not
Right, not the
the
amenities.
goods.
They don't have the opportunities that Americans have.
Right.
And they were kind of used to the big centralized big guy telling you what to do all the time. So they don't have a lot of natural initiative.
Right, I see.
And when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1992, these Soviet republics, you know, Hungary, Ukraine, a whole bunch of other ones, they were out from under the Soviet yoke. And so it was quite a learning curve for them, that they didn't know how to be their own country. They were used to taking direction from above. So we spent 3 years in Budapest. We lived in the Castle District, which is called the Var.
The Castle District.
Yeah, but there were no castles there. That's the joke about Budapest.
Right.
And Budapest is actually two separate cities split by the Danube River.
I see.
So Buda is on the hill, and that's where we lived. And that's the Var, where the castle district is, with no castles. But beautiful buildings, beautiful churches. It's spectacular.
Sure.
Like, our house was 450 years old, and that was one of the newer homes.
Wow.
And then you come down the hill, and these beautiful bridges, so many beautiful bridges that cross the Danube into Pest, where a lot of the commerce is, and that's where the embassy was. So we could walk to work in about 20 or 25 minutes. There's also public transportation we could take. Yeah, it's really beautiful. The Chain Bridge is the most spectacular bridge.
Chain Bridge.
Chain. With lions. They have lions everywhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like our house was this spectacular mansion that the entertainment spaces, because we had to entertain there very often, was so huge that they used to train the horses in the winter months.
Inside?
Yeah.
That's great.
It was so cool. And so my kids, who were 1 and 4, or 1 and 3.5 when we moved there, they got to ride their tricycles inside.
Oh, sure.
Just like where the horses were.
Right.
And the furniture in our residence was built for the residents, and it just had lions everywhere, and lions' feet, lions' head. For the first 2 years I lived there, I kept seeing more and more lions.
Really?
So they're into lions,
Right.
the Hungarians.
Power or something to do with that.
Something.
Yeah, right.
Royalty. You know, the
Royalty.
Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Right.
And actually, Hungary has more patents per person than any other country.
Oh, really?
They are very bright, very hardworking,
Right.
and they were able to keep their individual pride and culture better than, say, countries like Ukraine and some of the
see.
like Romania, because Hungary was only under the Soviets for a shorter amount of time.
So they were a little more driven,
Yeah,
motivated or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because there were grandparents that were still alive and parents that were still alive when they weren't under the Soviet yoke. And like in Ukraine, there really weren't any grandparents alive to remember what it was like before.
I see. Right. Right. Wow. What a difference just in the mindset of you just didn't want to go there, but you already knew that.
Well, but what Bruce said was...
How did you know that? How did you know that you didn't want to go there? Tell me again. You were...
Because when I visited Bruce in Ukraine...
Oh, in Ukraine, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I even brought Morgan there when she was 2 months old, and it was really hard. You know, you draw a bath for your for your baby, your firstborn, for your infant to take a bath, and the water is brown coming out of the spigot. And so then you're like, okay, I got to boil all the water, and then you got to wait for it to cool down, and now the baby is falling asleep.
Right.
And it was just this circle. And then she got sick. She got thrush, and we went to the best doctor in Budapest, who said, well, she has thrush, and this medicine, although it's been expired for 18 months, still has efficacy. And you know, when I had my second baby, I'm like, oh, that'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah, right.
But the first baby, the first time I'd ever lived in a foreign country,
Yeah.
you know, and they were still worried about TB in Kyiv.
Serious.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it was hard.
Wow.
So that was rough. so it's funny, I told Bruce that when he got a better apartment, I would come back. So my sister lived in Helsinki, Finland, and we were going to go there for Christmas. So I just went a couple weeks early.
Right. See ya.
And went to the Finnish doctor, and they had all the right medications.
Right.
And
They
then
weren't
Bruce
expired.
found a great apartment for us, so I came back in January, and life was good for a couple months.
Way nicer.
Yeah, way nicer.
Yeah. And then you went to France, or where'd you go from there?
Oh, so after 3 years there, we moved back to Annapolis,
okay.
Maryland.
Yeah.
And I went back to my job at the EPA Chesapeake Bay Program Office for 4 years.
Oh, okay.
And Bruce worked in D.C. and got to go to Iraq and then got to go to Afghanistan. Yeah, I had to stop listening to the news.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Oh, my gosh, It was really...
Yeah, right.
Because he was doing some very secret stuff in Iraq. And in Afghanistan, he was the U.S. Defense Attaché to Afghanistan.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
Wow, heavy.
And I was working full-time and 2 kids,
You were here, though, in America.
I was in Maryland.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And then the Army said, can you go to Hawaii? And we said, okay, we'll go. So we were there a year. Then the Army said, we need a defense attaché to Paris, to France. And Bruce didn't actually want it because it's just a really grueling post. Everybody comes to France. And people come to Paris always, like if they have meetings Monday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, they'll come for the weekend before, and they expect the embassy to give them a lovely program.
Oh, I see, right.
And such high-level people come all the time.
Yeah.
So he didn't really want to go initially. But we went, and it was a really fascinating time and just really so intense. We were both so burned out.
Oh, just too much stuff going on.
Yeah. But at the embassy in Budapest and the embassy in Paris, I got a job as an environment, science, technology, and health officer.
What?
Yeah, because
Perfect.
each embassy is like a microcosm
I see. Okay.
of the U.S. government.
What do you mean?
So every government agency, at an embassy as big as Paris, just about every government agency, which there are dozens, has a representative there.
Okay.
And so
they don't just do like passports and get you home and make you safe if you're in a foreign place?
Yeah,
There's
so
a lot more stuff going on?
That's the consular section that does that.
Okay.
And that's a critical role that they
Sure.
play. And a lot of people work there because it's a lot of work. Because they also give visas to the people who live in country.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that the people who get a visa to visit our country are properly vetted and that they're not going to overstay their visit or do anything wrong.
Right.
Because, sometimes people overstay.
Sure.
So-
That's what I think of when I think of. So they also have environmental.
Yeah,
Facility-
so under the economics section, they had environment, science, technology, and health all
No
in one
kidding.
rubric.
Oh, wow.
So when I was in Budapest, I did a lot of water resources and toxic pesticides
Oh, I see.
with the Hungarians, and that was fascinating work because Yugoslavia had recently broken up to all the separate countries, Bosnia, and that's when the Bosnian War was.
I remember. Sure.
And so another thing that an embassy's really good at is trying to bring warring factions together.
Okay.
And so the former Yugoslavian countries were killing each other because they had all these sectarian violence and all this stuff. But the embassy started a neat program whereby a shared natural resources, in this case the Sava River, that goes through all those countries. And each country needed the Sava River for irrigation, for drinking water, for their sewage treatment plant. So they all used this river. And we got the countries to start talking to each other by working cooperatively with this river. And I worked a lot on that project because the Chesapeake Bay, 6 states drain to the Chesapeake Bay. Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., parts of Delaware, parts of West Virginia. a lot of Pennsylvania, and it goes up to New York State. So the watershed of the Chesapeake Bay has all these states that all have their own, ways of doing business, just like countries. And so to get states to agree to protect the Chesapeake was a tall order.
And then try that with some countries.
Yeah,
Oof.
and so a lot of those lessons learned I was able to share with the countries. And every time we went to Bosnia, the embassy would drive me in an armored car, and I saw all these people on crutches with their, one leg blown off at the knee, because all those landmines.
Yeah, right.
It was really sobering.
Well, I'm from a little town in Michigan called Grand Rapids, and during that war, we had a huge flood of Bosnian people.
Yeah.
And there would be literally like a crowd of them at the park. My my kids were friends with their kids, and they all got along great because they don't know any different. But
right.
It was very hard to talk to them, to the adults. They didn't seem to want to talk to me. Like I was an outsider. There's a lot of wife beaters with the gold chains, and it's like, it's just like, I don't know if it's, I'm not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
it's a different culture.
It's
and there's
a different
huge
culture.
Language barrier.
Right, and I was just getting ready to say that often it's a language barrier.
Yeah.
You have to be pretty well educated to get English in these countries.
I see.
At that time during the Bosnia
sure.
conflict. In the last 20 years, English is the first language that just about everybody, or say the second language that just about everybody learns, because it's such a valuable language.
Sure.
And it used to be French was the language of diplomacy.
Yeah.
And now it seems as though English is the language of diplomacy and commerce. So we are so spoiled and lucky in this country.
That's for sure.
That our first language is what the world wants to speak.
Right. But our language is made up of the world.
Exactly.
We got everything from Greek to every
Lots
Spanish,
of French.
Latin,
Lots of
French, right? All that. So it is a conglomeration of all the languages.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but
so many.
So many.
And it's a really hard language, English is. There are all these idiosyncratic things or idiosyncrasies. There are so many exceptions to every rule.
Sure.
So, it's pretty daunting for foreigners.
Sure.
And those Bosnians were, I bet, shell-shocked.
Oh, I bet. Right.
Living with bombing and
you don't know what they were
friends,
here. Right.
Seeing your friends get killed, and it's happening in Israel and Gaza. And,
sure. Right.
Everybody, it really impacts you and makes you very fearful.
Sure. Right. Scary times we living in.
Yeah.
We, I don't know, being born in 1966, I was in this little window between Vietnam and Desert Storm.
Yeah.
We didn't have any wars. And we've had war ever since 25 years ago, right? I thought we were getting over that.
Yeah.
I thought us humans were getting smarter, but nope. It's just...
Yeah. I totally agree with you. It's such a foolish thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's why diplomacy is so important, because you can really stop wars with good, effective, well-supported diplomacy.
Right.
And it's such a foolish thing to cut the funding of, because you get so much benefit for each dollar that an embassy has or that the State Department has, because embassies and Americans are so well regarded in most of the countries in the world. Not every country.
Sure.
But the U.S. embassies also have neat programs where they identify the up-and-coming junior policymakers, junior ministers in these countries, and they will get maybe 24 of them to come to the United States for a program where they learn about how we do government, how we do commerce. It's just an excellent overview of how we run things in the United States. And then they go back to their country, and then about 90% of them become high-ranking officials in their country that they came from.
Right.
Yeah. Like when we were in France, Sarkozy was the prime minister.
Okay.
Or the president. I forgot what he was. Anyway, he had done that program when he was an up-and-coming minister. And the same in Hungary. their junior people came to the United States, and Viktor Orban has been their prime minister for, sadly, way too long now.
Way too long, right?
Yeah, and he's now on the dark side. But when he started in 2001, he was a young, up-and-coming, idealistic person who had done that training in the United States. So he was loved and respected by the international community for his first, probably till 2010.
Catapulted him right to the top, huh?
Yes.
Right.
And then, absolute power begets.
Yeah.
So then he went the Putin way.
Little rogue.
Yeah, sadly. And so, but anyway, most of the people who do this program stay on the good
Sure,
side.
right.
So, and just that kind of program doesn't cost much money, but it causes the host country to really open their eyes and deal better with Americans and democracy, and try to go in ways that are more conducive for doing business with the United States and for being a good country on the world stage.
Right.
So
Perfect.
diplomacy's worth every dollar. They should get more.
Yeah. Right.
And the military wants the diplomats to get more because they don't want to go to war.
They don't.
They really don't. Military people do not want to go to war.
Isn't that funny? It's like so much talk of war now.
Yep.
You
As if
know?
it's going to solve a problem.
It just
And it
doesn't make
doesn't.
any sense.
Well, it often doesn't solve a problem.
Makes it
right?
worse.
We had to go into Iraq, and that was an ill-fated war that we're still having nightmares about.
Exactly.
There are terrible people all over the world.
Right.
And, we should not try to fix every bad despot.
Right. Right.
Because what's happened in Iraq now is worse than what was happening under Saddam Hussein.
Afghanistan,
Yeah.
one after another.
Well, the
you know?
Afghanistan thing, we didn't stay and finish that job.
Right.
We got a good start in Afghanistan, and that's an impossible country. The Soviets
I've heard.
tried to, sort of take control of Afghanistan all through the 80s and 90s, and the Soviets left after like 20 years of trying.
Right. Right.
So to think that we could fix the Afghani problem in a year was just so foolish. But sadly, the president decided we had to go to Iraq, and now they took back then they took so many of the resources from Afghanistan to go to Iraq.
Right.
And that just opened up a whole bag of worms because that terrible dictator was keeping things sort of controlled, sort of.
In his own way, right.
Yeah, I mean, it was in a bad way, but who says we're supposed to go everywhere and fix it?
Right.
I don't think we should. We can't put our head in the shoulders or in the sand, but we've got to be so careful where we go to war.
Right.
That's the lesson learned there.
Yeah. I heard a gal talking on the internet about what was she talking about? Ukraine, where they had sent billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. And it's like, if we were to just take that same amount and put it into the infrastructure, 2.6 trillion or billion dollar, whatever they sent them over there, it was like, imagine if we put that into our infrastructure and started looking inward.
Yeah,
and that really frustrates me when you look at it that way, because it's terrible. The bridges, the electrical, the you name it, the dams, our infrastructure is rough.
Yeah.
We have no business be sending trillions of dollars over to a fight that's not going to win. It's already kind of lost. I don't know. I'm not a politician. I don't know, but it just seems like we're chasing our tail.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough.
I don't know where the policies come from, but I got it. It seems backwards and self-serving for some people and not others.
Yeah, but the big thing is, and Bruce learned this in the Army War College, war is a last resort.
It should be, right. It doesn't seem to be now, though.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But anyway, so we had a wonderful 3 years in Budapest, came back to Annapolis, and then had 1 year in Hawaii, on Oahu, and that was really something.
Wow, right.
We were on the north shore of Oahu, where all the big waves are. Not that we were surfers, but
sure.
That was where the best school was, and I loved swimming in the ocean. And then from Hawaii, we went to Paris for 3 years.
From there, okay.
Directly from there.
Yeah.
And Bruce and I had just gotten used to wearing flip-flops and had just gotten used to not being sort of an uptight East Coast.
Right.
And then you go to Paris.
Is it worse?
You talk about uptight. I
Really?
mean, oh my God. It is
That's funny.
very high. I mean, they looked, my first few months there, I just felt like everybody was looking down their nose at me.
I've heard that before. I've heard a lady was just a sweet lady too. She was just asked somebody directions, and they were just like, huh.
Yeah.
Turn their nose up at her like American or whatever. It's
well,
like, geez.
The big problem when we got to Paris, since Hungarian was the language I'd used most recently, my Hungarian kept coming out.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's why people were really looking at me funny, because all French know English.
Oh, right.
But they don't know Hungarian because nobody knows Hungarian.
Oh, right.
So when I finally rearranged my slow brain to the French I'd taken decades earlier, then
that happened.
Yeah. And then our dog, the French love dogs. So when I got my language better and the dog would come with me on errands, then life opened up. It was wonderful.
You must have an amazing mind to be able to pick up. You picked up different languages?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, only when it's desperate.
Yeah, right. When you have to talk to people.
And what I usually did was on the difficult languages, just learn maybe a couple dozen key phrases.
Right.
And it's amazing how much you can get done with 24 key phrases and a smile.
Right.
And pointing.
Right.
And head.
Smile, point,
yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
That works.
Better
than sign language.
I was able to get what I needed done.
Sure. Right.
But it can be isolating when you first get to a foreign country.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Bruce was so senior, we were always in these spectacular places, and there were no Americans around.
Oh, really?
So there wasn't, like when you're a junior officer, you're usually in a compound or in a building that has a whole bunch of Americans. But we had these glorious residences, but nobody around. Well, only locals around.
Right.
So
local people got to be interested in practicing their English.
Well,
no.
Yes, they were interested in practicing their English, but it's kind of hard. I mean, it takes a while to for people to talk to you.
Sure, right.
Because Americans are friendlier, and more cheerful than any country I lived in.
No kidding.
It is night and day.
Right. So they're not being rude. They're just normally that way.
They are they're quieter. They're
quieter.
They don't say good morning.
Wow.
Yeah, it is really, our culture here is much more outgoing and can-do attitude. And if you don't like something, eventually you'll speak up and say something.
Sure.
But in all the countries where I served, they would not. They would just suck it up.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Can you believe that?
Just beat down over decades and years, Yeah. What's worse, though? I don't know. Maybe it's better to just shut up and keep your head down.
I've certainly learned that for me, it's definitely a good idea to shut up
sometimes. I know. I've had to learn that the hard way, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, I only learned the hard way, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
So let's see. You asked about Ethiopia, and I'm sorry that I took a long time to get there.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
Got to ride the journey to get there.
Yeah. So we were 3 years in Paris, and Bruce was offered Berlin, Ethiopia, and one other country. And I had had enough of Europe.
Had you? Yeah.
Yeah. Right, and I'd had enough of. It's just gray there all winter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not a city gal, so the thought of going to Berlin was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that. And my dad had worked in Ethiopia in the 50s as part of a construction company that built the first airport there.
Oh, wow.
So I had always thought Ethiopia, like, wow, that's cool.
You had a connection.
Exactly.
Right.
And we thought, our kids have been in Paris, where life is quite good.
Yeah.
And there are so many privileged people there.
Sure.
So a lot of their classmates were, the kids of very privileged people.
Debutantes.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was kind of thinking, I think that our kids should see how most of the world lives. So
Is that most of the world? Ethiopia?
most of the world is kind of poor.
Oh, it's terrible.
It was a terrible drought
Is that what it was?
resulted in a terrible famine.
I see. Right. Kids were eating dirt,
Yeah.
sand, truly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad.
And Ethiopia is the only African country that was never colonized. Europe carved up Africa. So the Belgians, the Dutch, the French, they all took parts of Africa.
Really?
Yep. But Ethiopia, because it's the capital is on this high mountain plateau at 8,000 feet. And
They didn't want to climb up there?
nobody could make it up there. Well, I mean, they were good fighters, too.
Oh,
And
really?
they're very into tradition and culture and keeping the old ways alive. So during World War II, the Italians occupied Ethiopia.
Oh, okay.
But after the war, they left. But many Italians stayed because they had intermarried, and so Ethiopia has a rich culture of Italian heritage. There's wonderful Italian food and the macchiato, the coffee, and the leather. The Italian leather.
Oh, sure.
That's so famous.
Right, sure.
A lot of it is from Ethiopia
Right.
because labor is so cheap in Ethiopia.
I'm not very educated, but I think Italy was on German side in World War II, weren't they?
Yes.
At first. So they were the
Yeah,
bad guys.
Yeah.
Then they kind of got stabbed in the back or something, and they ended up not. Yeah, I don't know the history very well, but it seemed like when it started out, the Italians were kind of on Hitler's side, weren't they?
Oh, they were totally on Hitler's side.
Yeah, okay, I'm just.
Mussolini was right up there.
Mussolini, right, okay,
right up there
right.
with those nasty Germans.
Sure, right.
And he did some terrible things in Italy.
Right.
And I think a
sure.
lot of the Italian people didn't really want to go with Germany, but
I think a lot of the German people probably didn't want to go to Germany too.
Well, that's for sure. That's for
If
sure.
they'd have known the truth.
Yeah. So Ethiopia is a fascinating country, and I loved my time there.
Did you?
Of course, I loved my time in Budapest and in Paris too, but the capital of Ethiopia is called Addis Ababa.
And that's where you went?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where we were, and it's a high mountain plateau, so about 8,000 feet. So it's pretty rough, coming from sea level to go to 8,000 feet. It's like,
not a lot of oxygen up there.
yeah. And it's a beautiful country. There's such spectacular scenery and mountains, and it's so undeveloped.
Oh, really?
Yeah, people still live, people in Addis, the capital, live in houses.
Okay.
Although a lot of people live on the street too. And it was hilarious. The cars were all like Toyotas from the 1970s that keep on going. And then
Right.
there were some Ladas, which is the Russian
Oh, I see.
kickabout that had
Okay.
lots of duct tape, and you couldn't count on the brakes working.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the roads were shared with donkeys, and you'd have a herd of goats in the street with cars.
You just turn your car off and wait.
Turn your car
Pretty
off and
much.
wait. And they didn't have very many streetlights.
Oh,
And they had about 3 that were around the African Union.
okay.
Because Africa has a union, like the European Union, where a bunch of the countries bind together.
Oh, okay.
Africa also has an African Union.
Okay.
And it's headquartered in Addis.
Oh.
So there were like 3 stoplights around the African Union. Beautiful, beautiful
one
building.
beautiful spot,
it was
huh?
a beautiful spot. But they only turned those lights on when the African Union was in
Right.
session.
They call that the North Korean tour. To show you the best parts of everything.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was pretty dangerous to be on the road, but we all drove. The potholes could swallow up your car,
You'd lose your. Oh no.
and so when I would go, and that was the only place where I didn't work. I was offered a job at the embassy, but I decided that I really wanted to not work at that embassy because I knew my 40-hour work week would be about 70. And that's what I
Sure.
did in Paris, and my kids really suffered.
Well, your kids were what, 10, 12 at that point, so
In Paris, yeah. And then see, in Ethiopia,
they were a little older.
Keegan was 7th grade and Morgan was 9th grade. And also, as a defense attaché spouse, you really have to entertain a lot. And so I was hurting Bruce's career by being a little bit too wrapped up in my career. So
I
I
see.
decided for the kids and for his career. And plus, my
Right.
last boss in Paris was kind of a pain. So I thought,
Really?
I don't know.
Need a time off.
Yeah.
Need a little time out.
So
Sure.
I had a great life there.
Yeah.
Truly.
I bet. Well, those kids are at that point young teenagers and
Yeah.
shouldn't be unsupervised and
Yeah.
so-
Especially the older one.
right, exactly. Right.
And the younger one, too.
And the
Yep. They definitely, it
just
helps
need
to
some
have.
mom time.
Yeah. Sort of an eye, looking.
Right.
Yeah. It was
neat.
interesting times.
So the kids went to school in their public Ethiopian schools?
No.
or-
So each of these capital cities, we were always posted to the capital city, always posted to the U.S. Embassy
see,
there.
okay.
So although we were military, I've never lived on a military base.
Sure.
And we very rarely had very many military people around us. There were always officers who worked for Bruce, because as the U.S. Defense Attaché, he's here, and there'll be an Air Force Attaché, a Navy Attaché, the Army Assistant Attaché, Marine Corps was in Paris, Attaché there. But we didn't hang out with them. We were really encouraged to get to know the other countries. So our best friends were like the Dutch, the Canadians. We ended up having some great friends from France when we were there. And so we spent a lot of time with with people from other countries.
I see.
And the girls went to the international schools.
So you took them onto the base for school, or
No,
was that,
there was never a base.
there was? Yeah, right.
So they never went to DOD schools.
Oh, I see. Okay.
They went to international schools. So their classmates were the kids from foreign countries, diplomats, and lots of business people, like oil. In
see.
France, there was a lot of oil company people there. So, and all kinds of business people would send their kids to the international schools.
I see. But that's not necessarily military.
It's not military at all.
I see. Okay.
There's nothing to do with the military.
Oh, okay. Right. That makes sense. So
Because
you're at the embassy, there's a lot of military there, but it's not necessarily a military.
You know what?
I guess that's why I'm kind of confusing it with
Right.
being a base. It's not really a military thing, is it?
Right. Embassies have very few military people.
Ah, okay. I didn't know that.
So the embassy is protected by young Marine Corps people. Most of them don't have families. And then, like I said, there'd be 4 other assistant attachés that would all, work for Bruce.
From each
And they
branch.
all had families with
Right,
kids.
right. They were a little older, sure.
And so there would be 4 other military families at the international school with our kids. But mostly the embassy's full of State Department, IRS, Treasury, Transportation, EPA.
Wow.
Yeah,
There's like IRS in there and everything.
Yeah.
Huh?
Oh, yeah.
No kidding.
Oh my gosh. Well, there is a lot of coordination and cooperation that goes on with tax evasion
Ah,
and
right.
transportation. Like for tax evasion, when people hide their money offshore, other countries often have access to people who know more than what we can get. Because a lot of people don't like to talk to Americans. But the French have good access, or the Hungarians had a lot of good access, and so we did a lot of intelligence sharing on both military and on with CIA, with FBI. I mean, all those entities were represented at each embassy.
Wow.
So military was this big
No
at an
kidding.
embassy. Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah. There would be at an embassy like Paris, I don't know, 40 or 50 State Department people,
Right.
and a whole bunch of other, but probably more than that. Anyway, so State Department is by far the largest.
Right. There's a lot of important people there.
Yeah, we didn't stay in any kind of military housing until when we moved here in 2012 for Bruce's last posting at NPS, and we stayed in La Mesa Military House.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was our first time ever.
Nice little spot there. Really? No
Yep.
kidding.
First time
Even
ever.
in all different countries and everything
Nope.
else.
We were on the
Right.
economy, surrounded
Sure.
by locals.
Right. How cool is that? So Ethiopia. How long were you there, though?
2 years.
2 years. Oh, just quick 2 year.
Yeah. Well, it's a hardship post. So they only send you for 2 years.
Oh.
And the other, like Paris and Budapest, were not hardship posts. So those are 3 years.
I see. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the girls and I wanted to stay longer, but Bruce felt the need to come back to the U.S. because he only had a year or two before he had to retire, and he wanted to get his next job set up.
I
But
see.
we loved it there. We could
Yeah,
have stayed.
really.
The people are so gentle and kind.
No kidding.
They're all Orthodox Christians.
Oh.
And so, the Holy Grail is in Ethiopia.
It is, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
I've heard that.
And a lot of Ethiopians went to Israel. So they're Coptic Christians, and they have always had these really cool churches that are built into mountainsides and like in the ground, because they weren't. So at some point they weren't really allowed to practice their religion, but most of the time they have. And so they
went underground.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, but now that I said that, they have all these underground churches, and now come to think of it, I don't know why they built them underground. I forgot. I didn't know we
We'll
were
have to
going to
look
talk
that one
about
up.
Ethiopia. I will have to look that one up. Yeah. But anyway, they are still there, and when you go to Ethiopia, it's one of the big spots that people visit because it's just amazing.
Right. Is it hiding Christianity from the Muslims or something? I don't know.
And actually, when we were there in 2012 to 2014, the Christians and the Muslims got along great.
As they should.
Exactly.
Right.
And the Muslims were not as populous as the Christians. And there was one tribe that's always more in charge of the whole country, the Amara tribe. But another tribe is the most populous, and they always sort of feel like they get a little bit shafted because
Yeah.
there are more of them, and why aren't they in higher government positions? But it was very safe there. There were no problems going on when we were there.
Wow.
At Kenya, my friends that were in Kenya, carjacking,
Really?
thieves everywhere. And in Ethiopia, people were they were deathly poor. And they did beg, but they didn't steal anything because that's against their religion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And, they'd talk to you, and they sort of
Sure. I'm an
praise.
Indian kind of.
Right, exactly. So then I
sure.
was doing that too. Come to Monterey, and I'm like doing that, and people are like, "What are you doing?"
Where are you from? Ethiopia or something?
But the food's really cool.
Tell me about the food.
Yeah, the injera is the bread. They make it. It's very special the way they make it with. I think it's with hops and yeast and things.
Oh, no kidding.
So it actually has like bubbles in
Fizzy,
it.
right?
Yeah.
Sure, almost.
And it's big pieces, and it's really one of the super grains. It's made out of one of the super grains. All the Ethiopians are tall and slim and gorgeous,
Really?
hands down.
Because of that, they get the
Well,
best
they're
food.
just the people, They're great runners,
Sure.
just as the Kenyans are too.
Kenyans, right.
A huge running culture.
Oh, I bet.
And it's a lot easier to run when you're, this big.
Yeah, of course. Right. Yeah.
So injera is, and you just tear it off. You eat with your hands. And the Ethiopians have it's mostly plant-based diet. So it's a lot of beans with lots and lots of spices. So it's pretty hardcore. It's pretty
right.
hardcore. I had to sort of get the toned down
Keep
stuff.
Keep your insides healthy anyways.
Yeah.
Burn out any.
And they fasted on Wednesdays and Fridays. They didn't eat any dairy or meat on those days.
Huh.
And they really only ate meat, which would be like goats.
Sure.
The
Chickens, maybe.
the skinniest chickens and the skinniest goats you could ever
I've
imagine.
heard that. That's
It was
kind of
like,
what chickens looked like in their native state, though. They're
Yeah.
not all huge like we make them over here.
Yeah. So really, it was just a heck of a workout to chew.
Was it all tough? And
So we
chewy?
didn't eat much meat there.
No.
But it's really, they would gather around and everybody would tear off a piece. And then if you were dating someone, you would tear off a piece and get your beans on it and feed it to your
Ooh.
special person.
Right.
Yeah, so that was a big thing. And coffee was a huge thing. They have coffee ceremonies.
Oh, have mercy.
Yep, good stuff. Because
Yeah.
that's where coffee was made. Was
Really?
in Ethiopia. Or that's where it was first grown and first made into coffee beans.
beverage.
And a beverage.
Right.
At least that's what they told us. There
I'll
may
buy
be
it.
other countries that think that's the case, but
Yeah,
I
they
think
brought it to Colombia and they brought it to different places. I'm
Yeah.
sure they all want to claim it, but
I mean, Ethiopia, the culture is just so ancient, and
Really?
they're so proud of the people because they were never colonized,
yeah.
and so they have a lot of old-fashioned ways that you sort of wonder, like, because the
Where did
churches,
that derive from?
like the churches, the women came in this door and the men came in this other door. The women came in the east door and the men the west door, or the other way around. I forgot, but opposite doors. And if women were having their period, they were not to come into the church. They had to pray outside.
Wow.
So there's always a contingent out there.
Kind of getting a little personal, eh?
Exactly. It was like, but they're very, very male-dominated culture.
Sure, yeah. Right.
Women weren't involved in the church so much. It was all men that they would start as little boys,
Right.
and they would,
right.
memorize the Bible and.
Sure, yeah, right. Wow. I've heard that about different countries that I can't remember was one place he came from, he was trying to sell argan oil, and his cousins and his mom and his aunts, they all squeeze this argan oil
Oh.
and they send it to him in America to sell, and then he'll send the money back. He said because women have zero rights. They have zero anything. They have, and the only way that they can move up in society is money. Mm-hmm. So he sends all the money back to them, and now they're at the top of their society.
Yeah.
And for women,
Yeah. So it's fascinating how when you give micro grants to women, to women-owned businesses,
Right.
it's like more of the money goes to the family and the community than to any of the men-owned
Oh,
companies.
for sure.
Because the women take care of their family and they take care of their community.
Mm.
And it's tiny amounts of money to go, so that the woman can buy a loom or sewing equipment or something. And it just goes so far.
Sure.
These women really make a good living
Yeah.
and bring everybody in their community up.
That's
And they don't
great.
go drinking with it, and they don't go have an affair or anything.
Right. Pocket it or whatever. Yeah.
Or skip town.
Right.
God, I heard so many horror stories. Because like Ethiopia, they do get micro grants.
Do they?
Yeah, the women do,
Sure.
and the men do. I mean, whoever had a good grant proposal would get some money, and I swear half the time the guys did not put it to good use. They got the car, and they got the nice suits,
Right. For
For them,
but not for the community.
right? And they often left their wife too, and their kids are at
Sure,
home. And,
right.
they were, yeah.
I've talked about this one. I was watching this show, and this guy goes around the United States, and he talks to different people, different places. Just he's been all over the world. This particular one was up in the Appalachians, and there was an Indian tribe that was way up in the Appalachians, and basically it was the beginning of where the Trail of Tears started from. And these people that were there were the people that just didn't go on the Trail of Tears for one reason or another. They were too old or whatever. And then this pocket of people, and they do get grants as an Indian tribe, but it's a completely female-run situation.
Oh.
Men have absolutely nothing to do with it. Number one schools, number one, because like you say, the women just wanted, well, I guess they were getting the money from a gambling casino. That's what it was. I was thinking it was a government thing. But either way, the ladies took charge, and they just made it amazing. As soon
They
as
did
you,
good things with the money.
As soon as you drive off of the Indian reservation, it's just slums. This is completely the opposite of what I think of as an Indian reservation.
Right.
Because it's usually terrible.
I know.
Because it's run by the men, and there's
Yeah.
alcoholism, and there's drug addictions, and get turned over to the ladies, and they're out for the community and the children.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
I
what
get
a
it.
wonderful story.
It was really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should dig that one up sometime.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Wow. That's neat.
You know, right. Because men do. They sometimes make the wrong decisions.
Yeah, sometimes they do, and
Church.
sometimes they make the right decision.
Sure, right.
But in these kind of third world countries,
right.
more often than not, in my experience, being in some of these countries,
Sure.
more often than not, the man did not make the right decision.
No. Yeah, well. So then you came back to Monterey.
Yes, so our last so we landed here
Okay.
in 2014.
And the kids must have been pushing 18, 19 or something.
So Morgan entered 11th grade.
I have a Morgan
here.
too. That's awesome.
Oh. And Keegan entered 9th grade.
Oh, they were
So
younger.
ninth
yeah,
and 11th.
Oh, okay. So a little bit younger.
Yep.
Huh.
And it took quite a while to adjust to, no cavernous potholes
Right.
and to stop, praying to everybody.
Sure, right.
And just so much plenty here,
Yeah.
because
right.
there were all kinds of shortages in Addis also.
Sure.
Like
right.
if sugar was available, it was only available like one day a month.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And so word would go out. So
I
we'd
would-
race over there.
I wouldn't make it there. I'm a sugar freak.
Yeah, you would not make it
I
there.
would not make it. But I could live on coffee, so.
Yeah. Yeah. We went to a couple weddings, and they have beautiful wedding cakes. The most spectacular decorations, the icing,
Sure.
triple decker, and there is no sugar in the icing. It is just lard.
Oh, no.
I didn't know that. I took a big bite. I'm like, then you have to hide that.
I know, right? Because you don't want to insult anybody.
Exactly. And then at one of the weddings, they have this whole side of a cow hanging up,
Oh.
and they eat raw beef.
Oh, do they?
For
Tartar.
special, that's reserved only for weddings. Beef is hardly ever eaten because nobody has the money.
Yeah.
So you get the scrawny goats once a week or once a month.
Yeah.
It's probably more like once a month. And the scrawny chickens once a month. And then this beef, raw beef, at a wedding.
Raw beef is not good.
Well, it actually tasted really good.
Was it?
It was very flavorful, and I should have stopped at just those 2 pieces I was initially given. But my Ethiopian friends were so proud of me. Do you want more, Keely? And I was like, sure. Well, that was not a good idea. I should have stopped.
Mess up your belly a little bit?
The only time I ever got sick there.
Really?
My family was sick regularly. I have a cast iron stomach, but it couldn't compete with that raw beef. Too much raw beef.
I had a friend in high school that used to eat, he'd call them cannibal sandwiches with raw hamburger, and it was just the grossest thing, but we were bulking and weightlifting, so we thought it was good. Just
Well,
so gross.
The French, that's a
they?
delicacy.
Tartare, right?
Yeah. And so raw hamburger meat with an egg on top.
Oh, no kidding.
I think it's a raw egg on top. I never ate that there, but I had a French friend who had it regularly.
Hard
and I'm
pass.
just looking at salmonella,
You said right, exactly. That's what I'm worried about.
But the French have such high standards with their food. They are such perfectionists on
Right.
anything with food. They're not so perfect with everything else, but their food is just perfect.
Amazing. French food. French cuisine.
Yeah, it is just
right.
the most flavorful.
Really? But they're better with spices.
The French don't believe in using many spices at all. Butter is their
I can't
flavor
argue.
of choice. Yes, I also love butter.
I love butter on everything.
But the French don't do any jalapeno.
Oh, really?
Oh, no.
No.
They just look down their nose like, why? It burns your taste buds and you can't taste the food.
Right. You're right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some cuts of meat, you just don't even want to use anything. It's so good.
Exactly. It just melts in your mouth.
It's just, yeah, it's worse with the sauce or whatever, steak sauce, for sure. They got it right.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now? You're retired now.
Yes, I'm
How about
retired.
that?
Yeah. Well, I have
And
two.
Bruce is retired.
Yep, I have
Right.
2 rental properties back east.
Oh, I see.
So I go back there regularly because I manage them.
Oh, do you? You get family back there still, or?
I have my brother, who doesn't, I don't interact too much with him. But,
Yeah.
we're
I'm in
on
town. How
friendly
you doing?
terms. Hey,
That's
yeah,
it.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. And my stepmom's back there, and then of course my youngest daughter is in Washington D.C.
Oh, she is.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So when I go back, I do my rental property work, and
There
I
you go.
see Keegan, and nice to have my old stomping grounds.
Yeah, right. Just driving around and go, I don't recognize the place.
Well, I tell you, Anne Arundel County has just been paved. So much development.
Really?
It's a very desirable place to live because you can work either in Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and there's a lot of work in Annapolis, too. So it's such a stable environment. If any particular industry goes down, there's so many others. And that's why it's so populated there.
Right, right.
So what I spend my time here doing, I'm an avid cyclist. So that takes up quite a bit of time. And
Bicycles? Have you got the electric thing? Or
Oh,
you,
no.
Oh, you're not doing the
Oh,
electric thing.
no.
Good for you.
Oh, no,
Everybody's going e-bike now.
not me.
Good for you.
Yeah. I ride with the Velo Club of Monterey, and I'm trying to keep up with these guys that are in their 70s.
The Velo, what is it called?
Velo Club of
Velo
Monterey.
Club?
It's the cycling, the local
Okay,
cycling.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
VCM, Velo Club of Monterey.
Okay.
Yep.
And you do
so
that,
2 or 3 times a week.
y'all get together? Or?
Yep.
Oh,
We have
nice.
group
Really?
rides, and so we chat and visit and get coffee or a beer after. And then I've been doing triathlons, so that takes quite a bit of time to then swim and I do more hiking now instead of running.
Yeah.
The niece said,
Yeah.
save that running for something really important.
Right. But you're still going to do some triathlons.
Yeah, I just
And
had
that
one
does include
last
some running.
weekend that I had one
Oh,
in Morro
wow.
Bay.
In Morro Bay?
Yeah, November 5th.
Okay.
Sunday, November 5th.
Nice.
It's so pretty. I've never been there, so it was really fun.
Yeah. And that was a run? That was not a bike ride?
So it was a triathlon.
Oh, it was a triathlon, so it was all 3.
Yes, so
Okay.
you swim in the ocean,
Wow.
and then you jump on your bike, and you bike for a while, and then you run. And this run was on the beach,
Oh, geez.
which about half of the run was on hardpack sand, but there was quite a bit on soft sand. So that was sort of, 1 step forward and a half a step back.
Kind of uneven, too, right?
Yeah. But the scenery was so gorgeous. And, when you get to be my age, it's just the experience.
Sure, right.
And in triathlon, they write your age on your calf.
Really?
Yeah. So when I get passed by somebody in their 40s or 50s, I'm like, oh, that's fine. They're so
Right,
young.
right.
Well, we had about a mile left on the run, and this woman came up, and we were jogging together, commenting on how beautiful the seabirds were, and even though it was foggy, it was still beautiful. So we chatted for a while, and then she said, "Okay, I'll see you later," and she took off, and she was 69 years old.
Oh, have mercy. You didn't even know it until she was out in front of you.
So she came in first in our age group,
Wow.
which was age 60 to 69.
Did
And
you
I-
trip her and run fast?
No, there's
Just
such
kidding.
a sense of camaraderie.
No, I'm
Once
sure.
you get to be our age,
Sure.
So I came in second.
Wow.
Second out of 9.
Wow, how about that? That's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, for having a bum knee and a shoulder that's
Right.
questionable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just to finish.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
That's all I would make sure to finish.
That's all I
Not
wanted
looking
to
at
do.
times
So
or-
my goals are always to finish, and I don't want to be last in my age group.
Right. Is this something new for you, or have you've done triathlons before?
So I did my first triathlon in the fall of 1986
Have mercy.
in North Carolina.
Oh, no kidding.
Some buddies from work and I had rented a house, and we stayed up most of the night drinking tequila on the beach. And then this one guy said, "Hey, I'm going to do a triathlon tomorrow. You want to do it?" I'm like,
Drunk
well,
on
I was,
tequila?
I was
Yes,
drunk,
I will.
and I'm like, "What's a triathlon?" "Well, you swim and then you bike and then you run."
I can do all 3 of those.
I can do all 3 of those. So I did it. I probably did a dozen or a couple dozen in the late 80s.
Okay.
And then when I started working in D.C., I just didn't have any time.
Sure, right.
So I fell out of triathloning and cycling and just about everything for all of the 90s. And I came back to triathlon when I moved to Ethiopia.
Really?
Yes.
With all the runners. What are you, crazy?
Yeah.
Little tiny white girl trying to keep up with the Ethiopians.
So,
I'll see you at the finish line.
So there was one lake in Ethiopia that's swimmable.
Oh.
There's a bunch of lakes, but all those lakes have this deadly bacteria that if you get it in your system, it's like
I thought you were going
it's
to say
lethal.
piranhas or something.
Yeah. No, I didn't. No, hippos, there are some hippos, and of course they're very dangerous. But anyway, so I was friends with this crazy Dutch and this crazy German guy, and they started a triathlon club sort of thing.
Wow.
So we had 2 triathlons, 2 or 3 each of the 2 years that I was there.
No kidding.
And we swam in this lake that was like pea soup. I mean, I could see my fingers. It was just so much tannin in the water, but that kept that lethal bacteria out of the water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was
sure,
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you're swimming with this much visibility, and you know they're hippos, but you're like, when my time is up, my time is up.
Right.
So swim in this lake, and then you get on your bike, which we use mountain bikes because most of it was trails.
I see.
And the goats would sometimes take over the trail.
Really?
They would just stand there. And you're like trying to go, and they don't move.
They don't want you to go through.
Yeah. And then the run would be on trail and road, and
Sure.
yeah. Oh, another quick biking thing was in Ethiopia when I would go out grocery shopping and doing errands. If I drove the car, the beggars came right up to the car, and you always felt so guilty because they have, the cleft lip and
Sure.
the clubbed leg.
foot.
I mean, it's really sobering.
Right.
So one day I went with my bicycle on my mountain bike with my panniers, and I did all my errands that way, and nobody begged.
No kidding.
Yep.
Wow.
So then I started to do all my errands
There you
on
go.
my bike.
Right.
During the summer months, it rained, so I couldn't do as much on my bike
Sure.
in the, you'd sort of, but there was always a little bit of time when it didn't rain in the summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the way to do it because nobody begged.
Wow.
They love bicycles.
Sure. Yeah. But if you've got a car, then you clearly have enough to give me a little bit extra, right? You must be rich.
Yeah, and that's true. We had
It's true. Right?
so much.
I can't argue with that.
We left just about everything we owned in Ethiopia
Did ya?
because, they didn't have anything.
Yeah. Right.
And what little they get are the worst of the Chinese cast-offs. Chinese products have layers of quality.
Right. I was friends with a Vietnamese lady, and she would say the same thing. She would take back clothes, and it's like, well, these say they're made in Vietnam. Like, why would you take these back? They're made there, And she's like, well, they get shipped out, just like the shrimp. Like the shrimp are as big as your hand, but the only thing we get to eat in Vietnam are these little tiny ones because everything else gets shipped out. So for me to take even, Tommy Hilfiger or whatever back from America, even if it says made in Vietnam, they never would have had a chance to own that.
Yeah.
It was made to be shipped to America. Well, it's like, yeah, same type of thing, right? They just got the worst. Even if it was the best place to grow whatever they had, coffee or whatever, they would get the worst.
Yeah.
That's the way it is everywhere, I guess.
But it's about money. We're
Sure.
willing to pay a lot because we have so much money. We're a very
Right.
wealthy culture,
Yeah.
wealthy country.
Yeah, it just seems sad that people live there. They don't get to enjoy
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
You know,
that is sad.
right. So I think one of the first things you said when you came in, you're like, I don't have anything exciting to talk about. I've never written a book. You better write a book. You need to write a book.
You think so?
I think so.
Okay, well, if you know anybody who can help me do that,
I have so many authors in here.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. People that have other people write their books for them, or other people that just go in and just talk for, a few weeks to a writer, and then they just make a book out of it.
Oh, I'm good at talking.
There you go.
I would be
See?
happy to pay anybody
Right?
if they would like to take this task on. That would be great.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm serious.
Because when you live your life, you don't realize how cool it is. Mm-hmm. You know, when you come back and talk to me, like I went to Mexico City once. You know, I went to Canada once. I've been to Hawaii. But, you know, talk about Budapest and talk about, you know, the Danube. And it's like, I'm so clueless. It's so neat to hear somebody that's been there and the you know, the idiosyncrasies and all of the different things and from an American knowledge. That'd be a really neat book.
Well, that's a great idea. Well, yes, if you know somebody who could help me, I would be happy to do that.
Well, I have learned so much today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming in today.
Wow, well, thanks for asking me.
Yeah,
That's
right. What a blast.
something. Yeah.
That wasn't so hard, was it?
No, it was fun. Well, you're such an easy person to talk to.
Good. All right. Thanks you guys for watching. If you've got some value, hit the like button and subscribe. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.